Senator Walters.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. First, if you allow me to acknowledge the presence of some of the members of the Democratic Party who are joining us this morning, and also to congratulate Senator Reid on his appointment to the Senate. Mr. President, the leader of government business, in my view, surprised me because she was a little bit out of usual character. She seemed quite aggressive in the start. Her references to the Democratic Party exceeded maybe 50 times, so she focused a lot and tried to separate the work of the Barbados Labour Party when compared to the Democratic Party. I'm not sure if this out of character experience is because the Barbados Labour Party is unsettled, Mr. President, and that there are in this chamber, no, even in this chamber, becoming nervous because of all the movements, the promotions, demotions, resignations that have been happening within the ranks of their party. Mr. President, as good as the leader of government business thought that she delivered, she did not connect, in my view, a lot of all that the government has been saying to what is produced in these estimates and how they affect the estimates that we are debating today. The current government, this Barbados Labour Party government, Mr. President, is projecting to earn in the year 2025-2026 $3.9 billion Barbados dollars, following from a $3.2 billion revenue take in this current year that ends March 31st. Based on the information provided in subsequent documents of the estimates, in 2023 to 2024, the revenue collected by this government is $3.8 billion. 2022 to 2023, $3.5 billion. 2021 to 2022, $2.7 billion. 2020 to 2021, $3 billion. 2019 to 2020, $3.5 billion. 2018 to 2019, $2.9 billion. Between the period of 2018 and ending this coming financial year 2026, this government would have had at its disposal $27.4 billion of tax and non-tax revenue, Mr. President. The government is making more money in taxes than any other government has in the history of this country. Compared to the last administration, Mr. President, on an annualized basis, this government is extracting from the economy and the people of Barbados 34% more in taxes, between around $800 million more a year in tax revenue, Mr. President. This government, Mr. President, has taken more tax revenue from the people of this economy over the past 7 years, and including the upcoming year that we are here with this current estimates, bring it to 8 years, Mr. President, than the last government did in a 10-year period. Overall, the Barbados Labour Party, Mr. President, would have extracted $2 billion more in revenue in the 8 years, including next year, than the government of the last Democratic administration would have collected in 10 years, Mr. President. $2 billion more, and if we put it into context, Mr. President, almost 2 of those years or more, this country was impacted by the COVID pandemic, where economic activity came to a halt. But, Mr. President, we must not exclude the borrowings of this government in this equation. The government is on record of stating that they have borrowed $427.9 million between June 2018 and March 2019. 2019 to 2020, Mr. President, $340 million. 2020 to 2021, $1.1 billion. 2021 to 2022, $913 million. In 2022 to 2023, Mr. President, the government said that it borrowed $1.3 billion. The following year, 2023 to 2024, $1.37 billion, Mr. President. The numbers keep going up, Mr. President. 2024 to 2025, $1.6 billion, Mr. President. A total of $8.4 billion since coming to office, Mr. President. So that means, Mr. President, revenue for taxes, $25.5 billion. Non-tax revenue over the period, $1.8 billion. Debt to taxpayers, $9.6 billion, bringing a nice handsome total of $36.9 billion that this government has had at its disposal since 2018. And that does not include, Mr. President, the $1.1 billion it now has to borrow to finance its expenditure for this coming year. Does Barbados look or feel any different to the citizens? I challenge the government. I challenge the government, Mr. President. I challenge the government, Mr. President, not to talk to itself, but to ask the people today if their lives have improved or their livelihoods have improved after this government has extracted $36.9 billion, the most of any government in this country. $25.5 billion in revenue from taxes, Mr. President. Our businesses, our workers, the duties, non-tax revenue, $1.8 billion. And then they borrowed $10 billion, Mr. President, bringing it to $36.9 billion since May 2018. And as I said, Mr. President, if you add the $1.1 billion that we now have to borrow, because they have not even explained how they're going to finance the deficit, based on the $5.135 billion they intend to spend. And I guarantee you, Mr. President, that that amount of $5.135 billion will increase over the year. Because the changes that you have seen in this government of promotions and ministries splitting in two, and money shifting from one ministry to the next, you guaranteed that next February, March, as they did this year, there would be a supplemental to those numbers. Because they came to Parliament for a supplement of over $300 million. On the eve of the budget. So, Mr. President, the people of Barbados will judge. But I can tell you for a fact that the state of our polyclinics, Mr. President, there's no great improvement. There have been more notices coming from the communications of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital to tell people not to come, to self-diagnose, Mr. President, than we have had in any history of any government. $36.9 billion after. How many schools do we have that are new? How many new schools do we have, Mr. President? 7 years after. And if we include this the coming year where there's no plan to construct any new schools, what does this government have to show for all of this money that they have been collected? Our schools are still in a dilapidated state and a state of disrepair. They need repair. As we speak, a school close to here, St. Michael's School, the children are home 2 weeks now. This is the second week now. What? They are home, not in an institution, learning.
Well, that's their custom and practice.
You go down to Dickens Primary School running down. Go over to LSD School. Go school running down.
10 years.
Sella Primary, the floor in the classrooms dropping apart. Mr. President, as we speak, you are almost guaranteed that persons who are in the bus terminal cannot get a bus. And at 9 and 10 o'clock tonight, they will not get a bus. And they have to wait 2 or 3 hours for the last bus, Mr. President. But this is after collecting the most money in the history of our government, and almost 50% more than the last administration. Mr. President, reports to the country that the Salvation Army lines have increased. Donations have been increasing from the Salvation Army. The Salvation Army feeds the poor, assists with the vulnerable. We should expect to hear about an increase in support from organizations like the Salvation Army. The red benches in the parks. You can't carry your girlfriend now or your wife and wants to in a park at night because they took up with vagrant sleeping, Mr. President. Watch your Queen's Park. And that is also on the cuffs of giving an organization that is supposed to deal with homelessness $1 million in 2 years. And Barbados does not have an account for how that money has been spent. We hope that the government has an account and they are satisfied that the money is being put to the purpose that it is supposed to be put. The conditions of our roads, Mr. President, still remain the same. Some improvements, but some improvements were borrowed money won. And some improvements, and you know what started the improvements? Cricket World Cup. So the improvements were geared towards the main arteries to the Kensington Oval, Mr. President, not to the taxpayers that now have to pay the road tax. Not that those commuters that have the fuel tax, sorry, Mr. President, not those persons now who, working class people who now have to pay $3.50 to bus fare. This is the reality, Mr. President. There's always two sides of a story. This is the people's side, Mr. President. That is the government side. But this is the people's side, not the Democratic Party side. Go to the QEH and you're guaranteed to see somebody there that will do everything over the weekend. Guaranteed. I don't know if you're proud to say that. I'm embarrassed A shame after all of the money that has been committed by the taxpayers, Mr. President. Our young men are in crisis. Look at the crime situation, Mr. President. Look at the crime situation. And I'm going to get into that a little later, Mr. President. But the government, for some reason, we're talking about expenditure. We're talking about expenditure, Mr. President. And those on the other side have no choice over the next 2 days. They have no choice because they want to come back here next week, Mr. President. They have no choice but to defend the high-paying consultants. How can we be paying a consultant $140,000 a month, Mr. President? Admitted by this government. $140,000 a month. My households across this country seeing hell. But they have to, somebody here on the other side, Mr. President, has to stand up and defend that. They also have to defend the trouble of the leader. They have to, Mr. President, because they want to return to the chamber, to the honorable chamber. Now they will seek to justify, Mr. President, they will seek to justify a prime minister that says to the Barbados that she governs or leads, that she has taken 93 trips since 2018 on the backs of, this money is coming from the Treasury, Mr. President. The government has been in office for 94 months, Mr. President. And of those 94 months, the airport was closed because of COVID. They cannot fly. Do the math. And let us see if this travel is logical. If it makes sense that almost every 3 weeks, the Prime Minister has to take a trip. Mr. President, and the justification, Mr. President, is that it's travel with benefits. It's travel with benefits. So, the Prime Minister has brought back to the country $120 million in grants. I'm sure taxpayers are very grateful, Mr. President. But it sparked my curiosity because when I think about grants, I think grants are things that every government has access to or get in some form or fashion.
Not yours.
The senators are saying, not yours, not the Democrat Labour Party. We never get any grants on our road shows. Mr. President, the Central Bank reports of December 2011, December 2017, and the reports of December 2024 lists on the Central Bank reports the grants that were received by the government. In 2008-2009, $7.5 million. 2009-2010, $35.6 million. 2010-2011, $2.8 million. 2011-2012, $14.3 million. 2012-2013, $57.6 million. 2013-2014, $4.7 million. 2014-2015, $57.5 million. 2015-16, $18.1 million. 2016-17, $9.8 million. 2017, 2018, $22 million from the central bank reports. $229.9 million in grants during the period.
Far less trips.
Far less trips, Mr. President.
Far less trips.
Mr. President, between 2018 and 2024, as per the central bank reports, Mr. President, 2018 to 2019, $0.1 million. 2019 to 2020, $11.8 million. 18 to 19, $0.1 million. 19 to 20, $11.8 million. 2020 to 2021, $0. 2021 to 2022, $5.7 million. 2022 to 2023, $20 million. 2023 to 2024, $1 million. Now, it's very possible, Mr. President, that totals $38.6 million. And it's very possible that the other remaining 90 million or so is somewhere else, Mr. President, unaccounted for. We would like it to be accounted for, Mr. President. We would like to know where this $120 million is and the purpose of it and what it's being used for, Mr. President. I am merely, Mr. President, reinforcing what the leader of the government business said, that central bank reports are a credible source. I am supporting that view, and I have used that today to show that with less travels, the Democratic Labour Party raised more money. $229.9 million from 2008 to 2018, while the Barbados Labour Party, on record, raised $38.6 million, Mr. President. So despite, Mr. President, the humongous size of the cabinet, Barbadians are not feeling a difference. In this chamber, Mr. President, I'm a Minister of Health, Minister of Energy and Business, Minister of Culture, Minister of Innovation, Industry, Science and Technology, now, Mr. President, Minister of Educational Transformation, Mr. President. First time, possibly in the history of the Senate, that we have the Minister of Health and probably Minister of Education sitting in this chamber. I stand corrected. But does that speak to the deficit in the other place, Mr. President? And now has the members of this chamber nervous about who will lead and all this thing, who will lead this chamber, and who's next in line, and who's getting fast promotions or not, and who may has to get it now and try to curse the Democratic Labour Party. I will remind the chamber, Mr. President, that with 36.
Order, please.
Mr. President, I want to remind in my introduction of the amount of money, seriously, that this government has had at its disposal to govern on behalf of the people of Barbados, Mr. President. What do taxpayers have to show for it? Why, coming out of the recent estimates and debate, Mr. President, that persons are saying they are not seeing a change and they're not feeling anything different and the government is not doing anything to cost of living, Mr. President? This is not the Democratic Party speaking, this is the people of Barbados. Do not pretend that we operate in a vacuum. Do not pretend that you operate in a vacuum. You hear the news clippings on the radio. You canvass, or you should be canvassing, some of you.
Right now, the busy here, that's scandals.
Mr. President, to whom much is given, much is expected. And in the case of this government, to whom very much is given, very much is expected.
Don't worry about scandal coming soon.
Mr. President, Barbadians are the ones who are contributing that $36.9 billion. Don't let us fool ourselves about corporation taxes and all this thing. there is a place for the international business sector to provide resources for the government, any government. But we pay income tax, and we support businesses so that the businesses can earn a profit, so the businesses can pay over a share to the government. Consumers participate in that activity and is needed in that activity. If there's no consumer, then the corporation tax. So we are generating, and the burden of repayment of these funds rests at the feet of taxpayers. But a lot of wages are struggling to make ends meet. The rising cost of living, what does this estimate have in it for the cost of living, Mr. President? And Mr. President,
Hello?
a 20% increase in taxes on snacks
Enter.
does not offer any relief to any household. It is not that anybody wants to promote unhealthy living, but Mr. President, let's be real. A low-income household person, the family, cannot afford to send fruits to school, send fruits to their child to school, Mr. President. They just can't afford it. You have a situation where you are giving them a $300 solidarity allowance, Mr. President. We don't know what the process is to apply and to receive, etc. But this is the best the government can do. Share the burden, share the bounty. They have shared the burden, but there is no bounty. This is not bountiful. There's a difference between financial existing, Mr. President, and financial living. Financial existing, Mr. President, is when you get that weekly paycheck, and by day 2 or 3, all the money gone. And by day 4, you only have bus fare to get to and from work, Mr. President. Your utility bills, Mr. President, are in arrears, and you are consistently playing catch up. Financial existing, Mr. President, looks like when you cannot afford to buy the basic food items, and you have to do substitution from meat to corned beef, Mr. President. Those are realities. Financial existing, when you can't even save $20 in the credit union a month or a week, Mr. President. And then you remain at the mercy of our social system and our healthcare system, Mr. President. Financial living, Mr. President, is not living above your means, but being able to stock your cupboard and your fridge with the basic things that are good for you, with a wholesome diet. Make sure that your bills are paid and up to date, Mr. President, and that you are able to buy the food that you need to feed your children, and obviously to put something down for a rainy day. We want people to live financially free, Mr. President, to be able to do the basic things. That is the purpose of the government, to move persons from one stage to the next, Mr. President. And Mr. President, persons that fall in an income bucket of probably less than $500 a week are the most vulnerable. They're the ones that are most susceptible to this, Mr. President. And if you look then, Mr. President, at the continuous household labor force survey as at Q3 2024, you will see that the amount of persons that are earning less than $500 a week is around 44,900 persons, Mr. President. 34% of the workforce. How has the government made interventions to open up some consumer spending space for them, Mr. President? How has the government shielded them from the high increases in the supermarkets, on the shelves, on the stores and goods, Mr. President, even in services? And Mr. President, it's not only those at the lower end of the income bracket, but there are middle income and lower middle income families who have mortgages to pay, who have food to put on the table, who have vehicles to maintain, etc. And they fall in this critical stage of barely existing, or financially existing, Mr. President. So it doesn't exclude them. But what is in the estimates that they can say, this government is earning money, this economy is growing, and the government is bringing us along, taking us along, Mr. President. What is in it for these people?
Nothing. Not from the Barbados or the party.
The government, and I think it is intentional almost, Mr. President, that the government does not really use the word or the phrase cost of living. Last year, Mr. President, in the Prime Minister's budget presentation, I think, if I recall, the Prime Minister spent less than 5 minutes on the issue of cost of living. In this year's budget presentation, Mr. President, reference was made to it only once, Mr. President. Barbados is crippled with the increasing cost of living. This is the cry of the people, Mr. President. But the government has made no real interventions. They have surrendered into a position that they cannot do much, Mr. President. And you heard some of that today. You heard about the Price App. It is laughable, Mr. President. It is not an interventionist tool to restrict the pace of increase in the supermarkets. This is a tool that persons can go in and see where which supermarket or which mini mart has a cheaper price than the other. And if the government is fair, there are businesses and there are businesses. Everybody don't have the same price. You can't expect the guy that have a mini mart a village mini mart at the end of the street to have the same price of a massive conglomerate. Furthermore, it is very possible that he himself, who is a small business owner, trying to provide an avenue for the village to eat, has to go and buy goods from the same conglomerate, Mr. President. Price App is laughable, and Barbados paid it no mind, and will continue to pay no mind, Mr. President. It is a trophy for the government for when they get into certain circles, Mr. President. But I challenge Senator Blackman, because he's murmuring, to go into his constituency that was handed to him. And when the constituents complain about the price in the supermarket, tell them to visit the Price App. I challenge him to do that, Mr. President, and he will see the response. He dare not do it, Mr. President. He dare not do it. Mr. President, there have, Mr. President, there have been some acknowledgement by the government in August of 2024 that some retailers were acting, and I will use the word unresponsible. It was acknowledgement, Mr. President. I can't hear myself.
Order, please. I want to hear Senator.
Mr. President, there was some acknowledgement by a senior minister of this government that some retailers in this country were possibly engaging in unreasonable pricing of goods. Mr. President, I asked the government, what did they do about it? after acknowledging that there could be elements of unreasonable pricing, and I can use the word of price gouging, what have they done about it, Mr. President? Not one example of an intervention to call any person who has been suspected or engaging in activity of price gouging has been brought to the public's attention. Not one business owner, Mr. President. And I'm amazed because, Mr. President, in contrast, over the last few weeks, I have seen residents of this country, of this island, who have been hauled before the law courts, Mr. President, for overgrown lots, Mr. President, for legislation that was not even passed in this House 6 months ago, Mr. President, and having to pay thousands of dollars. And I'm not against it per se. I just show the contrast of an acknowledgement that wrong is being done, and meted out to the consumers of this country. Nothing has been done, but a small man that owned a piece of land, he followed the law enacted just a few weeks ago. 2 persons already to the law courts and paid thousands of dollars in fines. A stark contrast, but it speaks to the heart of this government, Mr. President. And Mr. President, if that is not enough justification, and you're talking about expenditure and writing off money and money available to government, this government, in coming to office, wrote off just over $1 billion in VAT, $1 billion in VAT that was owed to it. VAT is paid by all of us in here when we go shopping. And it is the duty of any person that receives VAT on behalf of the government to pay over to the government so that it can be used by all. Mr. President, the government did not give a tax amnesty on VAT. The government did not come and say, come and work out a payment plan on these arrears of VAT. Overnight, by June 2018, the VAT was written off, $1 billion in VAT. After they have admitted that they have inherited an economy that is in trouble, you know what $1 billion could have done in the economy that is in trouble, Mr. President? Because that's about all the things I listed before, from education to health to social work. And Mr. President, people are crying out about cost of living and what has the government done. In 2018, Mr. President, 2018, the government repealed the NSRL levy, Mr. President. And we were told then that it will cost hundreds of millions of dollars. So again, the government have foregone revenue, but it will bring down prices in the supermarkets and on the shelves across Barbados. The NSRL back then was 10%, Mr. President. And consumers have complained that even then, they did not see a reduction in the prices in the supermarket. And if you're removing 10% from what the prices of goods at the port, you expect to see a reduction, even if it is in at least in the first 2-3 months before prices start to go up again, adjust back up with inflation, Mr. President. The price of food and beverage in the 6 months following July 2018, when the NSRL was repealed, rose by 5.7%. They did not come down, Mr. President. They continue to go up at the same pace. But you know what, Mr. President? the taxpayers lost the millions of dollars and hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue that could have been put to good use in this country. No action taken to protect consumers, Mr. President. Not enough measures in this estimates that people can feel comfortable that the government is taking care of them. From time to time, Mr. President, we see notices of pending increases in goods that have to come into this country. It is becoming almost a norm now, almost the norm, that in every couple of months, there's a notice, prices are going to increase. This is happening in this part of the world, this is happening at this port, this is happening here, there, all over, and this is going to result in an increase. Not once has this government come up with an interventionist mechanism to treat to these increases, Mr. President. That is what the people expect. To whom much is given, much is expected. Not only did they get $36.9 billion, they got 30 of these since then, Mr. President. The last notice of pending increases to Bajans, the business community alerted Barbados that due to no fault of them, they would be incurring additional costs because of issues at the Bridgetown port, Mr. President. And you would expect a caring government, not one that pretends to care about people, you would expect a caring government to intervene proactively before prices go up. Because we know when prices go up, they hardly come down, if ever at all. But this government has not intervened up to now. So consumers now have to bear those costs that will be passed through because of issues at the port. So to withdraw yourself as a government to say that inflation is imported is a poor excuse. It's poor leadership, it's poor government, poor governance. If you have an issue that you are aware of, you try to intervene before it happens, especially when it comes to costs and cost pass-through, the pass-through cost to consumers. Because prices in Barbados only go one way, up, not down. If you look at the retail price index, regardless of what's happening in the international market, Barbadians only feel it when the prices are going up, not when the prices are coming down. The retail price index for food and beverage does not show a decline in food at all over the last many years, Mr. President. So it is for the government to intervene so that the prices do not go up. They have the ability to intervene. They are not excused because the price is inflated. But in this case, the price is made in Barbados because it is at the congestion at the Bridgetown port. It has nothing to do with the price that the importer is paying. The Bridgetown port, Mr. President, in the 2022 to 2023 annual report, has made a profit of $35.7 million, Mr. President. They can absorb these prices until they fix the situation. They have the financial space, the leg room, that they can absorb some of these costs before retailers have to take it on and then pass it on to the consumers. That is what we call protecting consumers, Mr. President. That is what people are hollering about in the streets. They talk about walking down Swan Street. When you walk down Swan Street, it is what the people said when you walk down Swan Street. What did they say? That the government has not addressed the cost of living. What they have not said, and which I will add no, is that after collecting $36.9 billion of tax revenue over the last 8 to 9 years, Mr. President. Interventions are needed proactively when it comes to dealing with food prices on the shelves because of the very nature of what the leader of the opposition said. Prices in most instances are imported, but there can be some adjustments locally. VAT remains the same, largely. Duties remain the same, largely. Port fees remain the same, largely. Don't blame it on the import price, Mr. President, and inflation globally. Mr. President, the leader of government business spoke about the compact, the price compact. And I think it is commendable, if I'm being honest, that some effort has been made to address the rising costs of food, especially in that critical time coming out of COVID. Based on the information, Mr. President, coming out of the Barbados Statistical Service, and to get an idea of the impact of the program called the Price Compact, not to criticize it, Mr. President, but to get an idea of the impact it had on households, Mr. President. Because every time, Mr. President, the opposition says anything about this government, they take it as we always arguing, always opposing for opposing's sake. This information, Mr. President, gives us a frame in which to assess the impact of the price compact. And when you look at we looked at two things, Mr. President. We looked at the import price index. And to support the leader of opposition's claim that inflation is imported, leader of the government business, Mr. President, during the period October 2022 and June 2023, in the heart of the compact, Mr. President, the import price index showed a 20.3% increase in price of food and beverage. Fine, Mr. President, that is the imported price. That is the price that importers have to take. The government, recognizing that there would be increases, said they're going to work to limit VAT, to limit duties, to limit markups. But when you look at the retail price index, Mr. President, between the same period of October 2022 to June 2023, in the heart of the compact, which ran from July 1st, 2022 to July 2023, you saw an increase in the price of food and beverages on the shelves of 22.3%, Mr. President. You have not seen a limiting of the pass-through to the consumer. The impact did not exist to them. And it is not the DLP that spoke out only on this matter, Mr. President. The Egg and Poultry Producers Association said they did not believe that consumers benefited from this price compact, and that they felt that the retailers is who benefited the most. The Barbados Consumers Employment Network is on record saying the price impact had not benefited consumers in Barbados. Clearly, Mr. President, well-intended it was, the impact that it had on the ground was negligible or did not exist. Mr. President, we spoke about the fact that we need to move people from just existing financially to living financially, being able to pay their bills without arrears, buy proper food to put in their cupboards and in their fridge, send school their children, put down a $20 a week in the credit union to build up a little savings for a rainy day, Mr. President. It also correlates, Mr. President, with spending power. And government cannot exclude itself from this activity. of ensuring that they do not diminish the spending power of its citizens. When this government came to office, Mr. President, the government did just that. It reduced the spending power in households. And from April 1st, Mr. President, it will reduce the take-home pay, Mr. President, of workers in this country. This government, this is dealing with cost of living. Prices going up, and your pay pack getting smaller, Mr. President. Mr. President, the paychecks will be reduced further from April 1st with the catastrophe fund, now the Resilience and Regeneration Fund, Mr. President, will almost be more than doubled, contribution will be more than doubled, Mr. President. And not only will it be more than doubled, Mr. President, it will now be on your full income, Mr. President. It will not be shielded by the income bracket in that threshold in the national insurance calculations. So persons come a few days from now will have less money on their paycheck. And it brings into question about this Resilience and Regeneration Fund. Who are the managers of this fund? Because this fund is seeking to take more money out of the taxpayers or out of the workers of this country. It is seeking now to ask employers to contribute as well, and it is taking monies from the dormant accounts, from off the banks, and putting it into the Resilience and Regeneration Fund. So we'll have more money available for the government to do its work. We want to know who are the managers of this fund. Who gets to say how these monies are used? The accountability is what we would like. Because if you're transitioning from a catastrophe fund, which speaks to a catastrophe, an event, you're moving out to a Resilience and Regeneration Fund, and resilience is a word that the government loves, Mr. President. So we don't want to be picking at the money, as the BHS would say. We want to know who manages this fund and how they are going to account to the taxpayers of this country when that fund is booming with financial resources in a couple months. So, Mr. President, that is from April 1st. But as the leader of government business went back to show what they inherited and what they had to do, I go back to 2018 as well. Because pay packs got smaller in 2018 too. Pay packs got smaller, Mr. President. The health services contribution, Mr. President, a contribution that is taken from workers and it is placed at the disposal of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Sources from the Queen Elizabeth Hospital show that in 2020-2022, the health levy retained $61 million, Mr. President. $61 million a year, Mr. President. Mr. President, that's $61 million from working people. And still have to go down to the QAH and face the same situation that they came and found. So they claim that they found it that way. But the stories are not good coming out of the QAH. But you are contributing $61 million more a year, workers, directly. Mr. President. And that represents, over the term of this government so far, this two-term government, Mr. President, $529 million. You can imagine what working class people could be doing with this money now. some of this money with this high cost of living, Mr. President? It is a substantial amount of money. Yet, cries are loud that the government is not intervening in the cost of living of the citizens, the people that they have voted in, that voted for them. And while we support the extension of the maternity leave, Mr. President, I said last year that I did my part. I did my part, Mr. President. You never know, more to come. You never know, Mr. President. We welcome it. But, Mr. President, but you cannot acknowledge only that a family would want to spend time with its newborns. You would also acknowledge that they will also want to provide for them financially, Mr. President. And it would be good. It's not too late. The government does whatever they want, whenever it wants. It would be good to give a grant, Mr. President, just an additional grant. Nothing to do with national insurance contributions, nothing to do with if you're below the income threshold or anything. Give a grant to help them in their home, Mr. President. Because the salary now has to stretch further when you have your family. Has to stretch further. So one-off grant is something the government can look at. Share the burden, which the taxpayers and residents of this land have been doing. Share the bounty. That is how you share the bounty, Mr. President. Because you know that the reality is, Mr. President, and it could be corrected, but that move to 12 to 14 weeks doesn't affect government's expenditure. It does not. That's the national insurance scheme that will pay those funds from money that they've collected, Mr. President. So it's not nothing that the government is putting into it. It's not going to cost the government anything. But these families will need assistance. These babies will need to be provided for. And life will have it, Mr. President, that I attended a gender review yesterday. That was the first time I've ever been to gender. They couldn't stay for the full time. But my good friend, he and his partner is having not one baby, Mr. President, not two babies, Mr. President, but 3 babies, Mr. President. And I wish them well. And I hope that delivery goes well, and that Barbados is able to see this triplet. Mr. President, I speak from my heart when I say to give a grant for the new births in this country. It is a financial burden. It is an experience of this world to have children. And everybody wants to have a child, and everybody's happy and can't wait till the baby's born. But when the nursery bill a week is $120, the Pampers, the formula, Mr. President, it comes at a cost. Share the burden, which Barbadians have shared. Share the bounty, Mr. President. The garbage and sewage contribution levy, Mr. President, we cannot ignore. We cannot. And I can't go in detail because I have limited time. If I had 10 hours, I could go for the 10 hours, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Sanitation Service Authority, it was stated in 2018 that the Sanitation Service Authority will no longer be funded by the Consolidated Fund. It said that in 2018. And that it will be funded by the Garbage and Sewage Contribution Levy, Mr. President. And that Garbage and Sewage Contribution Levy has yielded approximately $563 million since 2018 up to the end of 2026, if we extrapolate. The government can come and tell you that it's not 563 million, it's 530 million, and it is a lot of money, Mr. President. A lot of money. We are now told that that will be repurposed. So they're not going to deal with some of that will be repurposed, they're not going to deal with the sewage component anymore. So instead of getting the ease from the sewage component without spending power, Mr. President, instead of getting the ease off of the bill, because you know when and did all climate financing and the climate swap financing and raise the money to do the work that was intended to be done by this levy, you are to repurposed now. So although the work is done for the initial purpose, households still have to pay. So the government continues to reap the tax revenue from hardworking households, Mr. President. The fuel tax, Mr. President, was abolished July 1st, 2018, replaced the road tax. The government is collecting about $82 million more a year. Mr. President, are you seeing the picture that I am seeing? That with not intervening with the cost of products, goods, and services for Barbadians, and Barbadians having to take all of that increased cost, on the other side, the government has participated in reducing their spending power with these taxes, Mr. President. $82 million more collected. But yet, we have to go and borrow money to repair every road in this country. Yet the taxpayers have to borrow to repair every road in this country, Mr. President. What has this government been doing with all of this money? So, Mr. President, I've been calling a lot of numbers. But we have to add this $1.2 billion to the previous $36.9 billion that I spoke about earlier. It's almost $38 billion that this government has had, easy, from the taxpayers of this country. And yet people are complaining about poor health care, shambles in education, poor facilities in education, poor facilities at the police station, high cost of living. And they were not spared, Mr. President. I had to pressure this government to ask questions of why the price at the pump was not coming down. And up to now, the government has not seen it fit to explain to Barbadians why. That is how they govern. But I can tell you, Mr. President, that when it comes to the financial affairs of this country, the people of this country are grateful for the advocacy of the leader of the opposition. Because look at what's happening in Hope, Mr. President. Look at what's happening with the travel expenditure, Mr. President. Look at what's happening now with the fuel tax, with the price of the gas at the pump. Without the advocacy of the Democratic Labour Party, Mr. President, government is silent. Government only speaks when pressured. And we will continue to put on the pressure, Mr. President. But I argued strong for months why the price at the pump was not coming down, although all indications globally said otherwise. And Mr. President, I did my calculations, and that has cost persons who have to go to the pump at least $2.6 million a month for 15 months. We're talking about close to $40 million, extrapolated again.
Wait, people are going
So, carrying out the cost of living, the impact of that on small businesses and households, Mr. President. That is what this government has offered to the people of this country. And bus fares went up, Mr. President, from $2 to $3.50 in one shot. One shot. How do you feel about poor people? Poor people who catch the bus.
Still go.
Let me get real. Poor people catch the bus. Every single person here, Mr. President, will either get in their car and drive home or get a drop in the car home, Mr. President. Poor people who catch the bus, and to give them that shock overnight. You know the impact that had in households? Person already struggling to make ends meet. They're going to catch 2 buses to work and 2 buses back. It's the biggest blow. And some of you don't understand the impact of these things. But Mr. President, if we look at the reports coming out of the Barbados Statistical Service, at October 2018, when those bus rates changed, Mr. President, 51,500 workers earn less than $500 a week. A significant amount of people who are likely to catch the bus to go to work, from work, to the polyclinic, and to the conduct other business, visit family, whatever, Mr. President. Mr. President, we're having a little discussion about cost of living because the people are complaining that the government did nothing for them as it relates to cost of living. It is our duty as the opposition to raise these issues on behalf of the people of this country. Utility costs, light bills going up, Mr. President. And the leader of government business spoke extensively about all of the work that is being done in the Ministry of Energy. Barbados only have one question. Will it resound to reduce electricity cost, or at a worse, stabilizing electricity costs in households? Does it? All of the technical aspects of what happens in the ministry is fine. That is the basic question. In this estimates, can we expect to see a reduction in our light bills or a stabilizing of the cost that households have to pay for electricity? One of the worst things to do, Mr. President, is have to come home without light. And to find that the food, in the little meat you have in the freezer, you got to cook all of it. That is what will happen in working class families, Mr. President. And again, Mr. President, any caring government should want to ensure that persons are able to keep the light on. It will be interesting to see, which I do not have, Mr. President, the amount of arrears that are currently on utility bills in the country. It would just be an interesting fact to get an idea of how people are coping, but don't be fooled. Just don't play with lighter power. Just do not pay with the Barbados lighter power bill. If there's one thing they can ask a politician to pay, is the light bill or the water bill, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, what is amazing, and I use the word amazing, because, as I said, the leader of government business was comprehensive. She was comprehensive in her report when it dealt with energy. But in the estimates, we understand that taxpayers now have to fund refinancing for these renewable energy systems. She looks puzzled, Mr. President, but I see that $15.1 million is going to be made available to persons who can refinance their loans at the bank because of this toilet on the grid at the Barbados Light of Power, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I really regret.
What do you raise?
I raise on a point of order. I really regret having to intervene on the honourable member's intervention, but that is a gross misleading of the public of Barbados and a gross misleading of the chamber. Mr. President, the $15.8 million is already allocated from previously existing financing that has been unused for the purpose of the Smart Energy Fund. It is being repurposed for the purpose of making it available to business people. It is not new money, Mr. President. The honourable member is misleading the chamber, and if they don't understand, say so. But you don't get to muddy the waters in this way.
Please proceed, Senator Walters.
New money, old money, Mr. President. $50 million that could be transferred on that Smart Energy Fund. I help with some poor person in Dickers Farm or in Free Hill,
Pull up.
Mr. President. Old money, Mr. President? This is what this government is coming to know. Now they got old money and they got new money. That's taxpayers' money.
But they can't find money to go.
But they're repurposing it to facilitate their failure as a government.
Mr. Chairman, I rise on a point of order. The honourable member is again misleading the House. This is not taxpayers' money. This money has not come from any taxes, from any Barbadian, anywhere. There are two agencies that vested money, as a matter of fact. Both of them have endorsed and signed off on this project. This is not taxpayer money. And in actual fact, the honourable member is speaking about helping small businesses. This is for SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises who need the help. And the honourable member, if he does not understand, I do not mind. I understand that they may not know everything. I get that, Mr. President, but they do not get, especially his colleague who is trying to talk over me. If they don't understand, I get it, Mr. President, but don't mislead the public.
That's what the industry does all.
You don't understand that?
Thank you, Senator Cummings. President Senator Walters.
Mr. President, repurpose the money to help taxpayers of this country, Mr. President. Repurpose the money to help reduce the cost of living, Mr. President. Repurpose the money to the benefit of the taxpayers and the households of this country, not for the persons that they have led to make investments in the renewable energy sector and now are second salt because of their bad policy or bad implementation of policy, Mr. President.
Poor management of the renewable energy sector, that is why you need to put it there.
Mr. President, licenses and tariffs from the DLP, Mr. President. 25 years. Mr. President, the government can't shelve this responsibility on previous administration. They come to these chambers and make a lot of changes that Barbadians don't agree with. This government is going to give away a parcel of land, Mr. President, to a financially profitable bank. And they come to this chamber talking about old money and new money. Mr. President, the people of the country want to hear the Minister of Energy speak to them. She does not speak to them. The Minister of Energy speaks to the business class and the regulators. When she starts to speak to them, maybe she will start to listen to them. Communication, Mr. President. Light bills, based on the current implementation of this government, light bills will continue to rise. But they do not want to come and tell the people of Barbados, I'm not going to be the bearer of bad news. I'm going to be the bearer of facts. The Barbados Light and Power Company reports on their website that renewable energy costs is costing them an average of 18% more than fossil fuel costs over the last 3 months. Renewable energy is supposed to be cheaper, Mr. President. This is this government. They're in office for going 7 years. But that is what consumers have to be faced with. And we ain't talking about battery storage costs yet. Mr. President, tell the people of Barbados the truth of their realities. Speak to them, Minister. Don't speak to the investors. Investors don't even want to hear the Minister of Energy anymore because their money tied up. They're paying interest and they're not getting a return. She has been thrown under the bus, Mr. President. I tell you, because the Prime Minister parades about this renewable energy trust and the amount of hundreds of millions of dollars of investment that it will unlock. But what do we have? That the money lock up in the bank. And they're crying out now. Speak to the people of Barbados and you will get the right mix so that electricity costs can come down. The Ministry of Energy can be summed up. Light bills going up, investments locked out of the grid, taxpayers paying higher light bills, and taxpayers will still have to support those who cannot get their return on their investment because of bad policy implementation of this government. Mr. President, sometimes when I come to this chamber, I tend to want to move on and not live in the past. I honestly, Mr. President, look, I honestly do. I really do. Can't change the past, Mr. President, but you want a better future for Barbadians. And that is from the position that I always speak. What Barbadians are experiencing now is not a better future, no. It's not better. No, seriously, Mr. President, it's not better. It's not better. It's not better. But I would say, Mr. President, that if some of the others, on some of the senators on the government side, want to be like the Prime Minister, they go and listen to the MP for St. Michael Northwest. Hear what he has to say about that. Put on your scarf. I can't see the other things, Mr. President. But put on one of the scarves. Look, Mr. President, I don't like to go back, but Senator Cummings thought she had a point to prove this morning, Mr. President. She thought she had a point to prove. So she went back, and she acted as though the Barbados Labour Party is the best thing since sliced bread when they're in government. Mr. President, I refer to the 2008 budget speech from the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister David Thompson, and former Minister of Finance. And an extract from his speech, Mr. President, he was shedding some light, he was reminding Bajans of what the Democratic Labour Party saw when they came to office. And he said, but it is my duty to tell you in simple terms that my government is still discovering cases of excessive spending and fiscal irresponsibility that can only be explained in terms of a regime that assumed that it will rule forever and that no one outside their government would ever discover the mess they were creating. Oh my gosh, Mr. President. Oh my gosh. Crime and violence.
Same thing happening now.
He also continued on, Mr. President. Barbadians are already aware of the scandalous and sordid financial messes with the Greenland landfill, the GEMS project, the National Housing Corporation building at Warrens, Kensington Oval, the new Barbados to US currency prison, the bathroom facilities at Silver Sands,
Here. That's in here too.
and the wastage and squandermania at the Urban Development Commission, among others. This is 2008, Mr. President. I have not yet begun to deal with the ABC Highway project or the 35 million in roads in St. Philip, for which financial provision have not been made. Mr. President,
To that.
he went on to say, we also had to find $33 million to clear the National Housing Corporation's overdraft, $27.8 million for the Transport Board, $5 million for the Enterprise Growth Fund, $8.1 million for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital.
That. Can I get my...
Mr. President, the leader of government business made me read this to embarrass them, because this is an embarrassment, because they paint a picture that they're the best in sliced bread. They can do no wrong. Yet, they are not transparent, and they do not hold themselves to account. We have to wring everything out of them. Mr. President, when I was growing up, you used to hang the clothes on the line outside. Sometimes when you want your clothes to dry fast, you're going to wring them. I shake them out, bring out all the water. You have to wring information from this government, Mr. President. And you see it with hope.
Yeah, say that.
You see it. You see everybody hot and sweaty now. Big meetings to defend nonsense, Mr. President.
To defend him.
But Mr. President, it brings me, and I smiled when I listened to the presentation by the leader of government business, and how she spoke about all of what she considered to be the bad management of the economy, the macro picture, she said. And this government mismanages money. And it continues today, Mr. President. It mismanages and it wastes. And what it doesn't mismanage and waste, it gives away.
You say that leopard can't change this one. No, but
It is very important, Mr. President, that we safeguard every dollar, every cent that taxpayers put into the Treasury or in any other statutory organization, corporation of this government, Mr. President. Very important. Housing is in a mess. And I am not only calling for hope, home ownership providing energy to be shut down today. I called for this a few weeks ago before they were exposed, Mr. President. Because how do we see it fit to spend taxpayers' money loosely when you have a National Housing Corporation that can do everything that Hope is doing? And this minister of vesting lands, because he can't be Minister of Housing. Can't be Minister of Housing, because they're not housing. Minister of vesting lands is now trying to throw the previous management of Hope under the bus. Like, as if he excludes himself from the process of managing. He should resign. If he does not accept responsibility, do like the Minister of Crime Prevention. Retreat! Retreat, Minister! Mr. President, Hope, they're laughing because they all live in nice houses. Hope is wasting taxpayers' money. We are not opposed in the Democratic Labour Party. We are not opposed to spending $60 million in housing. We are not. But we need to get the houses. We need not to have squandermania. We need not to have corruption,
oh dear.
Mr. President. How much of the taxpayers' dollars has this previous management in Hope
So now what again?
taken? How much? And why or what took place that they got new management at home, did corruption take place? Is the Minister of Vesting Lands aware of corruption, Mr. President? He has to be held to account. But there's also a Minister of Big Works, Mr. President.
There's little works up there. Little works up there.
The Minister of Big Works. Everybody is defending Hope. Hope needs to shut down before it wastes more taxpayers' money, Mr. President. And that's the reality. It needs to be closed. It needs to be closed. The government is a great pretending government. Not only is it pretending to care about people, it is pretending that it can give away land and it is rich and it has enough money. Recently saw a headline, Mr. President, free land. But I swear that BHS don't get some land free. The government is giving away prime real estate land to a profitable entity. Mr. President, I went on the website of the African Export-Import Bank, and they have assets of $32.2 billion US dollars, Mr. President. I agree that what they bring will be benefit to Barbados, but what they'll be asked to pay to the taxpayers of this country for the land will be very negligible, Mr. President. $32.2 billion in assets. The $300 million investment, less the land, because it's a done deal. It is a done deal. Just like the Hotel Civic Center was a done deal. And we came in here, Mr. President, to pretend that it wasn't. To defend culture and heritage. So much so that one of our former senators is not here with us today. So much so that even the Minister of Culture, who sits in this chamber, had nothing to say, Mr. President. But she's smart. I see why she had nothing to say. Because she would not be here today if she spoke contrary to the Prime Minister. Mr. President, zero, the investment, Mr. President, is less than 0.9% of the bank's assets. A drop in the bucket, not even 1% of the bank's assets. The investment that they're making here. But we're giving away the land. But they will try to spin the story that the Democratic Labour Party is not interested in investment. We're interested in investment. But can we afford to give away land when there's so much critical issues that need financing? Mr. President, this estimates 2025 to 2026. It says estimated excess of total expenditure over current revenue, $1,155,240,134. We'll be rich. And you got to add that, Mr. President, to the $1.4 billion of deficit last year, and the government pretending that they can give away land. There's so much issues and so much money needed to deal with these issues. Mr. President, wastage. Taxpayers paying heavy for wastage. Steel frame homes. Housing is a mess. Housing is a mess. And the Minister of Vesting Lands cannot name 4 developments that the government has executed since getting into office. I can do it. I can list some of the developments that the Democratic Labour Party did because the leader of government business took us back there. Marshfield St. Philip, Work Hall St. Philip, Green St. George, French Village St. Peter, Fort Hill St. Peter, Woodbourne, Arley Heights, River Crescent, Green St. George, The Grotto, Sears Court, Stewart's Lodge, Country Park Towers, Valerie, Forest Roads, lower income homes in Constance St. George, Lancaster 1 and 2 in St. James, Woodburn in St. Philip, Riverview in St. Philip. Oh my God, man. We had a minister of housing and lands back then. Oh, we come to this chamber to vest lands in this thing, and vest lands in Hope, and vest lands in NSC, and we are not seeing the houses built. Important steel frames. Steel frame homes, Mr. President. The original cost moved from $29 to $53 million. And that was last year, middle of last year, March or so last year, Mr. President. That is a cost overrun of $24 million. That's significant. And that's almost equivalent. That's 82% of the original cost. How? When? Where? He probably is going to blame it on somebody else as well, because they think that they just forget about this. Because when they overlooked private small contractors to convince Bajans that they will import these homes and build them in 4 to 6 months, we're 3 years on and not all these houses have been built, Mr. President. But we are down, looking down the barrel, $24 million of taxpayers' dollars that could have gone to welfare and social services in this country. This is what this government is presiding over. Housing is a mess. I'm surprised that in the reshuffle that minister was not moved. But maybe because he doesn't call the shots in the ministry, Mr. President. Mr. President, the government is a great pretender, pretending all is well when all is not well. So you end up wasting, you end up giving it away, you end up overspending, you end up overlooking corruption, and yet you're extracting billions of dollars from the taxpayers of this country. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the debt. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the debt, but just to say, Mr. President, that to the government, stop pretending. Stop pretending. They have bills to be paid. They have bills to be paid in this country. Stop wasting. Stop squandering. Mr. President, I cannot speak about wastage without speaking about regathering, Mr. President. What is the purpose of regathering? Does it have a core purpose that is going to benefit the people of this country? We have not heard that articulated yet. I am sure that there will be an attempt during the debate, but Barbadians are not convinced. Is there still a regathering? Is there still a regathering, Mr. President? When last we heard about regathering? The gathering gone quiet now. The gathering is silence, Mr. President. The gathering is silence, Mr. President. Mr. President, I looked in the estimates to try to find out what does this regathering spend. I had to wring it out of the estimates. Thank you, Senator. That's the truth. So, Control F, and regathering comes up. Regathering in culture, Mr. President. Minister of Culture is here. Regathering in foreign affairs. Regathering in home affairs. Regathering international transportation. Regathering in tourism. Regathering Vision 2025. Regathering in youth. Oh my God, Mr. President, regathering in energy. We can start us out. Regathering in culture. Regathering in foreign affairs. We can start us out. Mr. President, the money split across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 9 ministries. It's not a joke. We make light of it here. But this is money that is scheduled to be spent. What is the benefit to taxpayers? How is it going to be spent? This is what we see. Picnic. A large stage with sound system, with lights and all sorts of fancy things. Now look at Don Marshall Montana coming to Barbados, Mr. President. You believe that, Mr. President? That's how we spend the taxpayers' money. And the people in St. Lucie don't have good roads or can't get water. It's not a joke. I make light of it, but it's not a joke. We moved to Watertown to St. Peter, Mr. President. Street parade. Not a picnic, Forty Hill National Park. That clashes with the whole town celebration, Mr. President. Look at here where it's whole town, you hear nobody fighting. Nobody there said nothing bad about whole town. Nobody said nothing bad about whole town. The Minister of Culture cannot even be seen at whole town, Mr. President. Nobody could the representative right? I think Senator Blackman right? Yes, Senator Blackman right, Mr. President, because of the constituency. But we said that, do not dare go and go to the gathering. That is what this government is doing. Watertown bad now. Watertown bad. I'm glad, if it's one thing that I acknowledge here, is the seriousness of Senator John King. God, it's no joke. He holds a high position in the regathering. High position. So I would expect a full account. I want the account of the spending. Barbarians want to know what is the purpose and the benefit to them. And I am not afraid to say, Mr. President, that the expenditure of regathering is going to be hidden in the National Cultural Foundation. I'm not afraid to say it. And the Minister of Culture is going to be at the feet of the expenditure for the regathering. But while the National Cultural Foundation will be asked to spend large sums of money, because that's just a start. St. Louis is just a start. Imagine when you get up to St. Michael. But St. Michael Northwest, we don't get roads, we don't get water, water mains replaced, we don't get schools fixed. The ugly duckling. And matters made worse by the comments of the Member of Parliament, Mr. President. An embarrassment to the Barbados Party and to the people of St. Michael Northwest. So, but when the regathering moves up to St. Michael and Christchurch and St. James, the money gets spent. Not this $5.5 million in culture. No, man. More money gets spent. I guarantee you that. But regathering is no silent gathering. They had these, I saw a couple years ago, silent parties came up. You go in the party and play out the music. So one body walking up, next body dubbing. Because everybody got their own music on. That's what regathering come to. That's what regathering come to. Mr. President, wastage. Well, we neglect the core things of our economy, crop over, planning for crop over. We don't have anything for the National Cultural Foundation or the Minister of Culture on the crop over happenings. But this March. Crop over is just about a few months away. What are they going to do? Put together an opening ceremony that ministers attend, and that's good enough. Mr. President, I am made to understand that the National Cultural Foundation is in a mess. Since 2019, more than 50 people, 50 employees either resign or did not renew their contracts. In a mess. And we're gathering with taxpayers' money. I can guarantee you, Mr. President, that they will spend more of taxpayers' money that has been identified in this budget on regathering. and they will try their best to conceal the spend. And instead of the Minister of Culture focusing on the priorities of her ministry, and in particular the National Cultural Foundation, that they can't get no employees to stay. Talk about the leadership of that institution. Talk about the fact that for the last week, they even had access to email, so they probably do no work. They cannot do what they were charged to do when they go to the office. This is happening in this country. But the government is parading parish to parish, spending taxpayers' money. And I am happy that at least some of the beneficiaries are small people. But does that justify the spending of large sums of amounts of dollars when we are staring our barrel of $1.1 billion deficit, and when we have so much challenges to face and to fix and to correct in this country? Mr. President, the government wants the DLP to withdraw itself from a conversation about reserves. And it uses a lot of emotive language about the state of reserves. We support adequate reserves. The Democratic Labour Party supports adequate reserves. What we have asked the government is that given the fact that most of the reserves is borrowed money, and they choose to hold such a high amount of reserves, 31 weeks, compared to the global benchmark of 12 weeks, what is the cost of that borrowing for the excess they are holding to taxpayers? They can try to flip it and swing it any way they believe, but that's what the question we ask. What is the cost of holding such an excess to the taxpayers of this country? They're holding 31 weeks. The global benchmark is 12 weeks. Why not 18 weeks, Mr. President? Why not 20 weeks or even 24 weeks, Mr. President? Why not double it and do 24 weeks, Mr. President? That's what we're asking, because it is a cost, and because taxpayers are not readily aware of the associated costs, they think they can come here and parade about going into the supermarket and able to pick something off the shelf. That's not what we're saying. How much is enough, Mr. President? How much is enough? Mr. President, the excess above the global benchmark of 12 weeks is about $1.9 billion, rounded off at $2 billion. And if the average cost of interest for the government was, say, 4.9%, that would cost taxpayers $97 million in 1 year. If it is below that 4.9% and is above 4%, it will cost taxpayers $78 million a year. But if the interest, Mr. President, has risen above the 4.9% and at 6%, it will cost taxpayers a whopping $117 million a year. What could we be doing with $117 million a year? Or $97 million a year? Or even $78 million a year? And even if it was $50 million a year? That's just the excess, Mr. President. And Mr. President, that is the question we ask. Tell Barbadians if those numbers are accurate or not. Or what is the cost that they have to pay? We support adequate reserves. But how much is adequate? When the global benchmark is 12 weeks, and you're not holding 24, you're holding 31. Mr. President, if the government held 20 weeks, because I heard it someplace else, the governor of the central bank making sport at this situation. See, when you become privileged, you've got to be very careful. Because I was there, I heard, he made a statement that 12 weeks, nobody don't hold 12 weeks anymore. And he cited all these other jurisdictions are holding 30 weeks and 40 weeks and 20 weeks and so forth. And he said that 12 weeks popped down. But the other side of that is that we do not manage those economies. We don't know that if that is borrowed money that they have. We know in Barbados that the 31 weeks is borrowed money. So we ask the government, is this the right policy, holding such a big excess? If the government was to reduce, Mr. President, that 31 weeks to 20 weeks, Barbadians, not the government, Barbadians could save $60 million of interest payments in this year. That could be shoved off of this expenditure. And if you counting, we counting all the wastage, all of the excess spending, excess reserves, excess corruption. That's all. So those fearmonger Barbadians, it is a simple question, it's a simple position. Why are you holding 31 versus 24 versus 20 when the global benchmark is 12? Now you don't want to hold the global benchmark, which is 12, but you want to hold the global benchmark for level of reserves, the debt to GDP, at 60%. So it's fine in one breath to say the national benchmark or the national target for debt to GDP is 60%, so we're heading for 60%. The global benchmark for reserves is 12 weeks, but we don't worry about that. We don't worry about that. Simple, Mr. President. That money, $60 million of savings, just making a little adjustment. I'm not going to get up and say, oh, the DLP made you all do it. It is for the betterment of the country. That $60 million could do what? Put some money into agriculture, Mr. President. We're going to reduce the deficit there since they committed to a deficit. Put some money into agriculture, Mr. President. Put more money into some community programs. Improve the sports facilities around the island. That could build 200 homes under a real Minister of Housing and Lands, not a Minister of Investing. Mr. President, another situation, Mr. President, and is very important to the country. It's crime, Mr. President. It's crime. And Barbadians are not happy with the state of crime in this country. Nor is it the LP. And it is, I raise the issue not to lay blame on the government, Mr. President, but still to ask the government, what is your response? How much money, more money, is going to be allocated in the estimates? How much more money can we spend to safeguard our neighborhoods, our communities, our small businesses? Mr. President, no retreat, no surrender. Did the former Minister of Crime Prevention retreat, or did he surrender? Mr. President, and we're already spending all the unapproved spending gone. Corruption and squandermania. Mr. President, we're talking about expenditure. We're talking about trying to make sure we have enough money to pay our bills. Mr. President, January 5th, a shooting in a public park in the Pine St. Michael. January 9th, a young man shot dead in St. Lucie. January 12th, man shot dead in St. Philip. 6 other persons affected personally. January 16th, shooting in the Pine again, Mr. President. January 18th, shooting in the Pine again, Mr. President. January 22nd, shooting in Silver Sands. January 23rd, shooting in St. Barnabas. January 23rd, gun robbery. January 23rd again, gunmen stick up a taxi man and passengers. January 29th, shooting death in St. Thomas, Mr. President. February 5th, murder in Vauxhall. February 8th, 2 gun robberies, cars stolen in that process. February 15th, armed robbery and a home invasion. February 20th, man shot dead in St. Lawrence. February 20th again, armed robbery in 6 Roads. February 20th, shooting in Long Gap. February 23rd, shooting in Parishland. February 27th, shooting death in St. Michael, Wavell, Black Rock. March 1st, a shooting, robbery of a food business in St. Philip. On March 10th, armed robbery after a party cruise. Gun-related crime. I am not blaming the government. We are asking what is the government's response to this activity, Mr. President. How could we wean out the wastage, the $7+ million in the regathering, and redirect it to help our police service? How can we strengthen our judicial system with the extra $60 million that we are paying in interest payments because we decide that we're going to hold so much reserves, Mr. President? That is the crux of the matter. That is the crux of the matter. There's no politics in death. But we ask the government, Mr. President, we ask the government to take action and to use the money put there by the taxpayers wisely. Be good managers of the purse, the public purse. In the estimates, I see National Crime Prevention Program. I assume that includes the peace program, Mr. President. $20 million will be last 2 years. $20 million. It's a lot of money. And again, if not for the leader of the opposition, we would not have unearthed. He had to wring the information out of the government. That the government minister was making payments that were not approved, or so we have heard. He has since then resigned, Mr. President. But what's happened to the $20 million over the last 2 years? What will happen to the $12 million estimated in the upcoming year? Under the National Peace Program, sad to say, Mr. President, which has been a failure, crime, especially gun-related crime, increased. Murders increased. And the person that was in charge of crime himself was thrown under the bus by the Attorney General, who said he had to intervene to stop him from spending money in an inappropriate way. Taxpayers' money. No retreat, no surrender. This is not a good story. The money, again, it is how does the government use the monies at its disposal for the betterment of the people? How does it do that, Mr. President? Time, Mr. President.
You have 5 minutes to wind up.
Mr. President, as I said, I could go on. There are a lot of issues in the country and flowing from expenditure, Mr. President. I shared with the Chamber and with Barbados the amount of money that this government has collected over the last 7 years, and including the upcoming year, which we are debating today. Revenue from taxes, Mr. President, 25.5 billion. Non-tax revenue, 1.8 billion. Debt, 9.6 billion. Health services contribution, 528 million. Garbage and sewage contribution, 564 million. Fuel tax, an additional 82 million. Excesses at the pump for 15 months because they did not reduce the price at the pump to consumers who remain vulnerable to the government, $40 million. $38.1 billion, Mr. President. And that does not include the wastage. Hope, Mr. President. Steel frame homes, important, Mr. President. The BTMI slogan. But we waste money on the BTMI CEO as well, Mr. President. We gathering funds. Peace program. Splitting Ministry of Education into two now, Mr. President. The government going to pay more for this. It doesn't come. We can't just split a ministry in two and don't give the ministry support. Is that even incorporated in here, Mr. President, or will that come at the end of the financial year? Those are simple questions. Wastage with an oversized cabinet, of whom 5 ministers sit in this chamber. Yet, Barbados has not been transformed. Barbados has been transformed to a revenue-generating entity for the people that run the government. But the lives of people have not been transformed, Mr. President. The government must put people first. We need strong governance, Mr. President. A government that will build communities in this country, that will build prosperity among the poor and transform and enhance lives. I challenge, in closing, Mr. President, I challenge the members of the government on the other side to get up out of their seats and go down to Palmetto Street, High Street, Swan Street. Don't criticize the leader of the opposition. We have seen the ministers here. Take a team down through these streets with the Nation newspaper and Barbados Today and ask the views of the people. See what they tell you. See what they tell you, Mr. President, about their reality. Ask them if they feel a difference in their households after contributing close to $40 billion and putting it at the disposal of this Barbados Party government since 2018. Barbados have shared in the burden. But you, the government of Barbados, are guilty for not sharing the bounty. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Walters. Senator